The first time I saw my husband in handcuffs, he was still wearing his uniform. Military police marched him across the parking lot at Fort Liberty, the late afternoon sun bouncing off the silver in his rank. Voices murmured around me, low and buzzing like flies. "That's Staff Sergeant Williams, right?" "AWOL," they said. I heard CID's involved, and the general, too. People stared at him like he was a stranger, but I knew every line of that face. The man being shoved into the back of that MP SUV was the same man I married at 19, the same man I waited for through deployments, the same man I once believed would die for me. Now he'd almost destroyed me instead. I took a breath that scraped like glass down my throat. My name is Harper Williams, and my husband didn't just cheat on me. He went AWOL from the Army to shack up with a general's daughter. He tried to erase me from his life, his records, and even my own mind. He thought his rank, her last name, and their connections meant I'd never fight back. He was wrong. Because if the Army taught him to go to war, it taught me how to survive one. 2 years earlier, if you'd asked anyone on post who we were, they'd have said we were that solid couple. Harper and Lucas? Yeah, they're good people. We were the cliché, sure. High school sweethearts from a small town in Georgia. We got married the summer after graduation, moved to Fort Liberty, and built a life out of commissary lists, deployment schedules, and cheap furniture we swore we'd replace when things calmed down. There were nights I sat on the back stoop of our on-post housing, watching the sun set over the pines, listening to bugs hum and distant cadence calls echo through the air. I'd hug his hoodie around myself and reread old messages he'd send from basic. "Can't wait to come home to you. You're the only thing getting me through this." At 19, those words felt like vows carved into stone. At 27, I would learn they were written in sand. When Lucas got orders to deploy to Poland as part of a rotational NATO presence, I didn't cry in front of him. I smiled, kissed him, helped him pack, tucked little notes into his socks and sleeves. "You'll be back before we know it," I said. "Yeah," he answered, pulling me in tight. 9 months, tops. Then we'll finally take that trip to the beach, remember? We stood in that cluttered bedroom while his duffel lay open on the bed between us, a physical reminder that our time was already borrowed. I remember thinking, if I can be strong for him now, he'll be strong for us later. What a sweet, stupid thought. The first few months he was gone, he was the Lucas I knew. He sent selfies with the guys, tired but smiling. Quick videos in his sleeping bag, whispering into the camera so his roommate wouldn't hear. "Hey babe, long day, miss you like crazy." Emails about the cold, about boring briefings, about Polish food, about the guys in his squad. He'd end every message with some variation of, "You're my home, Harp. Don't ever forget that." I saved everyone. I guess the general's daughter never got to see those. Somewhere around month 5, things started changing. He called less. Blamed it on longer hours, shifting schedules, more missions. Messages got shorter, sloppier. "Busy, can't talk, love you." "Bad signal, later." "Can't really say what we're doing, you know how it is." And I did know how it was. I knew what it meant when he said he couldn't talk about things. I'd been married to the Army about as long as I'd been married to Lucas. I understood classified. I understood patchy Wi-Fi and bad timing. What I didn't understand was the tone. That dull, flat edge that replaced his usual warmth. He sounded like a roommate, not a husband. But I told myself, he's tired, he's stressed, it's just deployment brain. The lies we tell ourselves to keep breathing could fill a book. He came home in the spring. There was a welcome home ceremony on post, flags waving, kids with welcome back daddy posters, wives in carefully chosen outfits trying to look casual and not like they'd spent 3 hours on hair and makeup. I wore jeans and his favorite green sweater. I spotted him in the formation before he saw me. Same tall frame, same close-cropped brown hair, same uniform, different eyes. He looked older, harder, like someone had carved new lines into his face with a knife. When he finally made it over to me, he hugged me. I hugged him back. The embrace was firm and solid and completely unfamiliar. He smelled like jet fuel and starch and something else I couldn't place until weeks later. Perfume. Not mine. Hey, I whispered into his chest. You're home. Yeah, he said, kissing the top of my head instead of my lips. Yeah, home. It would be weeks before he kissed me properly. At first, I told myself reintegration was just awkward. We'd been apart nearly a year. He had to get used to being around me again, to being in a house instead of a barracks, to waking up to a wife instead of an NCO banging on a door. I made his favorite meals, kept the place clean, gave him space when he was quiet. He had trouble sleeping, jerked awake at random noises, snapped once when I tried to touch his shoulder while he had headphones on. Don't do that, he said sharply, eyes flooded with something like fear and rage mixed. I flinched and pulled back. I'm sorry, I was just... It's fine, he muttered, rubbing his face. Just loud. Everything here is loud. He lounged on the couch a lot, half watching TV, scrolling his phone with the screen turned slightly away from me. The first time his phone lit up with Addison C on the screen, he flipped it face down so fast he nearly knocked it onto the floor. Who's that? I asked, forcing my tone to stay light. He didn't look at me. Just someone from base. Work stuff. Since when do they let you save work numbers with emojis? He'd put a little star next to her name. He shrugged. Everyone does that now. It's not a big deal. He changed the subject. I let him. I told myself I was being paranoid. Additional duties. New task force brief. He'd leave at 4 in the morning and not come back until midnight. Sometimes not at all. I'd wake up in the dark and roll over into a cold, empty space. I'd listen to the quiet hum of base life beyond the window and wonder where he was. I blamed the army. I blamed the mission. I blamed the system that always seemed to take more of him than it gave back. I didn't blame him. Not yet. One afternoon, I was at the commissary when I ran into Mia, another Army wife I knew from the family readiness group. She was the bubbly type, always in leggings and messy buns, holding a Starbucks cup like a personality trait. Harper, she called, abandoning her cart to come hug me. Hey girl, Lucas is back, right? Yeah, I said, smiling. He got home about a month ago. That's awesome, she said. I thought I saw him the other day near Cross Creek Mall, but then I remembered he was supposed to be in the field? I blinked. In the field? Yeah, she said easily. My husband said half their unit was at some training thing at Camp McCall all weekend. Said they had to stay overnight. No phones, no nothing. Oh, I managed. Right, yeah. He was at training. Mia nodded, already moving on, chattering about sales and new FRG gossip. I nodded along, my mind stuck on the fact that Lucas had told me he'd been sleeping in a tent in the woods, while someone else thought they saw him near a mall. My stomach twisted. For the first time, I let myself think the word I'd been avoiding. Lying. I started paying more attention. Not snooping, just noticing. There was perfume on his shirts I didn't wear. Tiny glitter specks on his collar after he came back from the field. A hotel charge once, buried in the bank statement. Work travel, he'd said without blinking. To where? I'd asked. He'd shrugged. You know I can't talk about everything, Harp. The way he said it made me feel guilty for even asking. That was his favorite trick. Weaponized secrecy. The night everything truly shifted, I was in our small kitchen, scrolling on my phone while waiting for pasta to boil. I'd just logged into our TRICARE online portal to check on my own referral request when I noticed something. An appointment. Under Lucas's name. Womack Army Medical Center, Behavioral Health. Date, last Thursday. He'd told me he was out on a range all day that day. I stared at the screen. Maybe they'd moved his schedule. Maybe he'd grabbed a last-minute appointment. I called out, Lucas? He was in the living room, headphones in, eyes on some YouTube video. He didn't answer. Lucas! I tried again, louder. He glanced back, half annoyed. What? Did you have an appointment at Womack last Thursday? I asked, walking toward him with the phone still in my hand. He frowned. What? No. It says here you did, at 10:30. He shrugged, eyes flicking to the screen and back. Must be some admin thing. I don't remember. Why are you going through my medical stuff? I wasn't going through yours, I said. I was checking mine. It popped up. Well, don't, he snapped. That's my business. Your profile is literally on the same login as mine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm your emergency contact. I thought maybe something was wrong. Nothing's wrong, he said flatly, turning back to his video. Drop it. He put his headphones back on. The conversation was over. At least for him. For me, it had just begun. That night, while he snored beside me, his phone face down on the nightstand, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the slow spin of the fan overhead. I wasn't crazy. I knew that. So if I wasn't crazy, something was wrong. I'd spent years on this post. I knew how things worked. And if there was one thing the Army taught me, it was that paper trails told stories people tried to bury. I decided to follow his. The next day, I called Womack's main line. Hi, I said, trying to keep my tone casual. My husband had an appointment last week, and I just wanted to confirm if he actually checked in. There was some confusion with his schedule. The clerk on the other end typed for a moment. Name? Staff Sergeant Lucas Williams. More typing. Yes, ma'am, she said. He checked in for his 10:30 a.m. behavioral health appointment. So he was physically there? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Yes, ma'am, he checked in with his ID. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat at our tiny kitchen table, phone in my hand, pulse pounding in my ears. Last Thursday, he'd told me he was on a range all day. Couldn't call. No signal. He'd been 10 minutes from our house. Not in the woods. Not in training. Just lying. That was the first piece that didn't fit. Once you notice one, you start seeing them everywhere. That night, while he showered, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his pockets. I told myself I was looking for receipts, nothing more. In his ACU pants, I found a folded scrap of paper. On it, in his messy handwriting, underneath, 4 numbers that looked a lot like a gate code. In the corner of the paper, 2 simple letters. AC. I stared at them for a long time. Then I went to our bedroom, grabbed my laptop, and typed Colonial Hills, Fayetteville into Google. A gated community popped up, not far from base. Big brick houses. Perfect lawns. Definitely out of a staff sergeant's price range. Perfect territory for generals and colonels, though. I added Fort Liberty General Cross Daughter into the search bar. The internet, as always, provided. Within minutes, I found photos. General Nathaniel Cross, Commanding General of 18th Airborne Corps. Tall, stern, all ribbons and sharp creases. Next to him, at some charity gala, a blonde woman in a tight black dress. The caption read, General Nathaniel Cross with his daughter, Addison Cross, at last year's Military Family Scholarship fundraiser. She was gorgeous. The kind of gorgeous that knew it. Confident, polished, with the kind of smile that said she'd never been told no a day in her life. And there, on her wrist, was a tattoo I'd seen before. A tiny crescent moon. In glitter earlier on Lucas's collar. Crushed, angry, humiliated. My husband wasn't just cheating on me. He was cheating with a general's daughter. I didn't confront him that night. I needed more than one scrap of paper and an online photo. I needed evidence. Proof. The kind of proof people with stars on their shoulders couldn't wave away. So I started doing what military spouses have always done best. I watched. I listened. And I kept my mouth shut until it was time to open it. Over the next few weeks, the pattern solidified. Training weekend at Camp McCall? Our bank statement showed a charge at a nice restaurant 15 minutes from Colonial Hills. Late night briefing? His car's GPS history, yes, I figured out how to check it, showed his last destination as the gated entrance to that rich neighborhood. He started leaving a spare duffel by the door, never packed with field gear. Nice jeans. Button-down shirts. Cologne. The man was going on dates while telling me he was running night ops. The first time I saw him driving out of the Colonial Hills gate, my hands shook so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I'd parked a few streets away, my little sedan looking painfully out of place among the luxury SUVs and imported cars. He pulled out in his battered Chevy, windows down, music on. He was laughing. I zoomed in with my camera just in time to see a flash of long blonde hair leaning over to kiss his cheek before he drove away. I took the picture. Then I drove home. And I screamed into a pillow so loudly my throat hurt. Every part of me wanted to storm into that house, bang on the door, drag her out by her perfect hair, and ask her what it felt like to sleep in another woman's marriage bed. But another part of me knew better. I wasn't just dealing with a mistress. I was dealing with a general's daughter, on a base where her father's name opened doors and closed mouths. If I went at this wrong, I wouldn't just lose my husband. I'd lose everything. A week later, I showed Lucas the picture. We were in the kitchen. He'd just come home from one of his late-night briefs, smelling like cologne and hotel shampoo. I stood by the counter, phone in hand, the photo pulled up. "Where were you tonight?" I asked softly. He grabbed a beer from the fridge. "Work," he said. "Long day. I'm tired." I turned the screen toward him. "Try again." He froze. In the photo, His car was clearly visible, rolling out of Colonial Hills. He squinted at it. "That's not me," he said. "Really?" I asked. "Because the car looks just like yours, plate and all." "Lots of people around here drive the same truck," he said, taking a long drink. "With the same dent on the bumper from when you backed into the mailbox?" I asked. He slammed the bottle down so hard, some beer sloshed onto the counter. "What the hell were you doing there, Harper?" he demanded. "You following me now? That's insane!" "What I'm doing is trying to figure out why my husband spent the night in a gated community instead of our house," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "Who lives there, Lucas?" "Officers," he snapped. "Important people who actually matter." I stared at him. "More than your wife?" He laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Don't make this about you." "It is about me," I shot back. "You promised me you'd be at training, and instead you were at some rich neighborhood. So who lives there?" He leaned back, eyes hard. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." "Her name is Addison," he said finally, his mouth curling around the name like it tasted good. "She's someone who can actually help my career, someone going places." "And you're what?" I asked. "Her charity case?" His jaw clenched. "You're nothing compared to the family I'm about to marry into," he said quietly. The words landed like a slap. "Marry into?" I repeated. "You're already married." "Not for long," he said. "Not if you keep pushing like this. You're unstable, Harper. Everyone sees it. You obsess, you snoop, you blow things out of proportion." "Everyone?" I asked. "Who's everyone?" "People on base. Addison. Her father." "The general?" I whispered. He smirked. "Yeah, General Cross thinks it's sad, honestly. You clearly can't handle the lifestyle. He says I deserve better support if I'm ever going to move up." I stared at him, bile burning my throat. "You're sleeping with his daughter and he thinks I'm the problem?" He shrugged. "When you're at a certain level, people understand these things differently." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Cheating isn't a level, Lucas. It's just cheating." He stepped closer, eyes cold. "Be very careful what you say," he murmured. "You don't know who you're picking a fight with." "It's my husband," I said. "I think I'm allowed a fight." He leaned in until his face was inches from mine. "If you try to make trouble, no one will believe you," he said. "You're a mess. You cry, you overreact, you spiral. I've talked to behavioral health about it." That made me blink. "What?" "I told them you've been paranoid, unstable, that you might be a danger to yourself if I leave," he said casually. "They're making notes, so if you try to scream and yell and accuse a general's daughter of anything, it'll look exactly like what it is, crazy wife losing her mind." I backed away, my legs suddenly unsteady. You told them I was unstable?" I whispered. "I'm concerned for you," he said smoothly. "You need help. You should be grateful." "You're sleeping with another woman and trying to get me labeled unstable?" I asked. "Are you out of your mind?" He shrugged. "This conversation is over," he said. "I'm going to bed." He walked past me like I wasn't there. He went to sleep in the bed we used to share, while I sat on the kitchen floor, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the cabinets. For the first time, I was more afraid of my husband than I was of losing him. The next day, I went to behavioral health. Not as a patient, as a spouse. The receptionist smiled politely. "Hi, how can we help you today?" My husband, Staff Sergeant Lucas Williams, said he spoke to someone about concerns regarding my mental health. I said, doing my best to keep my voice calm. I just wanted to verify what was said. She frowned. We can't share details of another patient's session, she said, even if it's your spouse. I understand, I said. If there's anything in my file, I want to see it, under my name. She checked. There was nothing. No notes. No flagged concerns. No referrals. Sometimes service members do bring up family things in session, she said carefully. But that doesn't automatically create a file on you. And our providers are trained to differentiate between genuine concern and other dynamics. She didn't say manipulation. She didn't have to. Could I talk to someone? I asked, just for myself? They scheduled me. The counselor I met with, Dr. Chen, listened as I explained what was happening. The lies. The late nights. The general's daughter. The mention of behavioral health and creating a record about me. She nodded slowly. I can't discuss anything about your husband's specific sessions, she said, but I can tell you this. If a service member tries to weaponize mental health services against a spouse, that's a serious concern, and it usually says more about them than it does about the spouse. So there isn't some file saying I'm unstable? I asked, my voice small. No, she said firmly, there is not. And if anyone tries to suggest that during any kind of legal or command process, you have the right to request clarification and documentation. I exhaled shakily. Harper, she added gently, have you considered that you might be in an emotionally abusive situation? The word hung there. Abusive. I thought of slammed doors. Sarcastic comments. Manipulation. Gaslighting. Cheating. I didn't want to, I said. But, yeah, I guess I have now. Over the next month, I quietly became someone my husband no longer recognized. He thought he'd broken me. In reality, he'd finally given me a reason to stop protecting him. I pulled bank statements. Every hotel charge. Every nice restaurant. Every jewelry store. He'd been using our joint account like a personal slush fund. 2 pawn shop transactions caught my eye. I drove to the addresses on my day off. Both places remembered him. Yeah, Staff Sergeant, right? The clerk at the first shop said. Nice guy, sold a couple pieces. Old-looking. Wedding set? My blood ran cold. Do you still have them? I asked. Nah, he said. We moved 'em last month. Sold fast. Real gold. The second pawn shop had my grandmother's locket in the display case. A delicate gold heart with tiny scratches on the back where she'd once tried to polish it herself. I'd given it to him for safekeeping before his deployment. He'd sold it to take his mistress on a weekend trip. I bought it back. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot and sobbed until my chest hurt. When the tears ran out, something else took their place. Resolve. In the bottom of one bank statement, I saw it. A purchase from a jewelry store in Raleigh. I called the store and pretended to be confirming a warranty. They were happy to help. Oh yes, the saleswoman chirped. That was a white gold engagement ring, round cut center stone, halo, very on trend. He said she was the daughter of a general. He was very excited. I hung up before she could hear the way my breath hitched. My husband had bought an engagement ring for another woman with our money, while still married to me. Ambitious, stupid, and about to be very, very expensive. If Lucas and Addison wanted to play games, they'd picked the wrong opponent. Because while I didn't outrank a general's daughter in status, I outranked her in something she clearly underestimated. Survival training. The kind they don't teach at West Point. First, I went to his unit, not to his chain of command. To the admin office. I asked simple questions. Can I get a copy of my husband's LES? He's been weird about money, and I want to double-check something. They printed it. I saw the usual deductions. I also saw an allotment I didn't recognize. A chunk of his pay being sent to a separate bank account I knew nothing about. I went to the bank and asked about it. No, they couldn't give me details on an account that wasn't joint. Fine. I didn't need the account number. All I needed to know was that he'd diverted money away from our household while still listing me as his dependent. Next, I asked, very casually, a friend of mine whose husband worked in logistics how lost gear was handled. She rolled her eyes. Honestly, it's a nightmare, she said. Guys lose stuff all the time. Most of it is legit, but sometimes... Sometimes? I prompted. Sometimes people fudge reports, she said. Say something went missing when it didn't. If CID thinks something's up, though, they'll come down on them hard, especially if there's a pattern. Pattern. The word lodged in my brain. I knew Lucas had been around supply. I also knew he suddenly had nicer things than his paycheck should allow. A new watch. A fancy tablet. Designer sunglasses. All while our car insurance was overdue. So I did something I never imagined I'd do. I gathered everything. Receipts. Screenshots. Photos. Notes from my session with Dr. Chen stating there was no evidence of any mental health concerns on my part. Printouts of his TRICARE appointments that didn't match his supposed duty days. A list of dates he claimed to be at Camp Mackle versus charges in Fayetteville and Colonial Hills. The pawn receipts. The engagement ring purchase. I put it all in a neat, labeled folder. Then I made copies. One set went into a waterproof envelope I hid in the trunk of my car. One set stayed in our house. And one set went to someone who didn't answer to General Cross. The Inspector General's office. I didn't file my complaint with his immediate chain. Why would I? His immediate chain was under Cross's shadow. Instead, I drove off post, sat in my car outside a coffee shop, and called the IG hotline. I need to report potential misconduct involving a service member and a senior officer, I said, and I'd like to do it confidentially if possible. They listened. They took notes. They asked careful, pointed questions. Then they asked if I was willing to submit documentation. Absolutely, I said. By the time I hung up, my hands were numb. But a strange calm had settled over me. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be going quietly. It didn't take long for things to shift. Lucas started coming home tense. He'd slam cabinet doors, snarl when I left a dish in the sink, pace at night, muttering about people poking around who shouldn't be. Is everything okay at work? I asked one evening, keeping my tone light. He glared at me. Why would you ask that? You've been on edge, I said. Maybe if you weren't always watching me, I wouldn't be, he snapped. I went to the bedroom, closed the door, and smiled into my pillow. If he was rattled, good. It meant someone was finally rattling him back. A week later, 2 men from CID showed up at our door. They were polite, professional. "Mrs. Williams," one said, flashing ID, "we'd like to ask you a few questions about your husband's whereabouts on some specific dates, if that's all right." I invited them in. I made coffee. I handed them the folder. I watched their eyebrows climb as they flipped through it. "I know he's been going to Colonial Hills instead of training," I said. "I know he's been using duty status to cover being off post. I know he's been spending household funds and pawning my property. I know he's involved with General Cross's daughter. And I know he tried to create a fake narrative that I'm unstable in order to discredit me." One of the investigators looked up sharply. "You spoke to behavioral health about that?" "Yes," I said. "Dr. Chen confirmed there is no file indicating I'm unstable." They nodded, took more notes. They asked if I felt safe. I hesitated. Did I? Physically, maybe. Emotionally, no. "I'm careful," I finally said. "I have copies of this folder in other places. If something happens to me, people will know." One of them gave me a long, assessing look. "Understood, ma'am," he said. After that, everything sped up. I heard whispers before Lucas did. Spouses talk. They exchange looks at FRG meetings, in commissary aisles, at playgrounds. "Did you hear there's some big investigation? Something with General Cross's name attached. The IG is involved. You know it's serious when they show up." We didn't talk about it online. Screenshots travel. But the air on post felt charged, like right before a storm. Lucas got called in for questioning. He came home that night, eyes wild, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. "What did you do?" he demanded as soon as the door shut. I blinked. "What did I do?" "CID," he snarled. "IG. They're asking questions about my duty days, my whereabouts, about her." "Maybe they finally noticed you were in 2 places at once," I said. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to remind me who had more upper body strength. "Let go," I said. He held on for a second more, then dropped his hand, pacing. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" he hissed. "Do you have any idea who you're messing with? That's a general's family. Do you have any idea who you're married to?" I shot back. "Someone who knows exactly how much trouble AWOL and falsified reports can cause." He laughed harshly. "They won't touch me. Cross won't let them." "You sure about that?" I asked softly. Because last I checked, even generals answer to someone. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "You're going to regret this," he said. "Maybe," I said, "but you already regret underestimating me." Days turned into weeks. Slowly, the picture came into focus. Not because they told me everything. The Army never tells you everything. But because pieces leaked out in bits and fragments. Lucas had been marked present on days he hadn't shown up to his unit. Those absences were coded as temporary attachment to other duties. Duties no one could verify. On several of those days, his vehicle had been logged through the gate at Colonial Hills. His phone, when they got the records, pinged off towers in that area. Not Camp McCall. Not any training range. Just a wealthy neighborhood where a general's daughter lived in a house bigger than our entire block. The word AWOL started getting thrown around. Quietly at first. Then louder. Then, louder. AWOL is one of those words that makes soldiers straighten up. It's not just being late. It's not just slacking. It's a betrayal. An absence when your presence was counted on. A hole where a person should have been. Lucas had been creating those holes for months. Addison had just filled them with satin sheets and expensive wine. It wasn't just the absences. They found gear. Equipment logged as lost that somehow ended up at a civilian reseller a state away. They followed receipts, tracked transactions, phone calls. Someone had been moving things off books. And it sure as hell wasn't me. I heard later that when they confronted Lucas with the evidence, he tried to blame everyone but himself. Supply sergeants, clerks, anyone whose name he could remember. But numbers don't lie. Paperwork doesn't forget. And Addison's devices, well, she'd recorded more than cute little videos of them in bed. She'd saved everything. Messages where he bragged about fudging duty rosters, where he joked about using PTSD as an excuse to disappear, where he called his own chain of command idiots for signing off on falsified forms, where he talked about me. She's just breeding stock, he'd written in one message, useful until I marry up. When they told me that line, I went completely still. Are you sure? I asked. The CID agent nodded grimly. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said, but you needed to know. I nodded. I did need to know. Because that was the moment any last pathetic glimmer of love I had for Lucas Williams died. Not quiet. Not peacefully. But like a fire smothered under a steel boot. They confronted General Cross, too. I didn't see that part. But rumors flew. He'd pressured admin staff to alter records. He'd signed off on transfer requests that made no sense. He'd used his position to shield Lucas more than once. Just a young man making mistakes, he'd said in more than one email. A promising soldier with a bright future. A promising soldier who was sleeping with his daughter and calling his wife breeding stock. Taste level questionable. The Army doesn't like public scandals, especially not ones that make leadership look corrupt. So they did what they always do when a mess gets too big. They started quietly cleaning it up. Lucas was flagged. His access restricted. His movements watched. He went from swaggering through the house to pacing like a caged animal. Addison stopped showing up in his texts as often. I suspected her father finally realized the grenade his daughter had been cuddling. General Cross retired. Not in a blaze of glory with a big ceremony. Not with a parade. With a short memo and no fanfare. Effective immediately. Rumor had it he'd been strongly encouraged. You don't get to play God with records and expect no one to notice forever. The day they came for Lucas, I was sitting at our dining table sorting through bills. There was a knock at the door. He opened it. MPs. CID. His face drained of color. Staff Sergeant Williams, one of them said, you're to come with us. For what? He snapped. AWOL, the MP said. Larceny, false official statements. You know the list. They cuffed him. He looked back at me as they let him out. His eyes were wild, desperate. You did this, he spat. You ruined my life. No, I said softly. You did that yourself. I just made sure people saw it. He tried to lunge toward me. The MPs held him back. They pushed him into the SUV. The door slammed. The vehicle pulled away. And just like that, the man I'd built my 20s around was gone, leaving nothing but legal paperwork and the faint smell of cologne in our hallway. In the weeks that followed, I spent more time at the legal office than I did at home. Jag was clinical but kind. They walked me through separation options, divorce procedures, my rights as a spouse. You are entitled to certain protections, the captain explained, especially given the circumstances. Am I? I asked, because sometimes it feels like I'm just collateral damage. He shook his head. Not this time, he said. You've provided substantial evidence of wrongdoing. That matters. I froze our remaining joint accounts where I could. I documented every bill, every payment, every missing dollar. I filed a separate report about the pawned jewelry and savings. The car was in both our names. The judge would have to sort that out. I kept driving it. Small victories. I also did something else. Something quieter. I reached out to a popular anonymous military spouse page on social media. I sent them my story. Names blurred. Details tweaked. But the bones were there. AWOL for an affair with a high-ranking officer's daughter. Falsified records. Weaponized mental health. Saved screenshots. A spouse who refused to roll over. They posted it as story time when your husband thinks rank will save him. The post blew up. Comments poured in. I know this is Fort Liberty. This sounds like someone I know. Good for her for going to IG. People act like rank makes them untouchable. It doesn't. For the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy. I felt seen. Of course, nothing online stays secret forever. Addison found out. She messaged me from a burner account first. Then, when I didn't respond, from her real one. The first message was simple. You're pathetic. I ignored it. The second was longer. You really think anyone's going to remember you in a year? She wrote. You're just some nobody army wife. Lucas told me you were boring, that you were dragging him down. You should be grateful he even looked at you, considering where he could go. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, considering where he went. I finally typed. I'd say my standards were already too low. She replied instantly. You think you've won? You destroyed his career. That's on you. No, I wrote back. He destroyed his career when he walked off post to sleep in your bed instead of showing up for duty. You'll die alone, she snapped. Better alone than as someone's breeding stock, I wrote. You really should read the messages you save more carefully. There was a long pause. Then, you bitch. I blocked her. That was the last time we spoke. She and her father faded into the vague background of people who used to matter on post. Lucas went through his Article 32 hearings, then his court-martial. I testified once. I answered questions. I didn't cry. I saved that for the bathroom afterward, where I gripped the edges of the sink and let myself shake for exactly 1 minute before washing my face and walking out again. He was found guilty on several charges. AWOL, larceny, false official statements. Conduct unbecoming might as well have been stamped on his forehead. He lost his rank, his career, his benefits, his dream of being a commissioned officer. I lost my husband. Turns out, One of those losses hurt less than I thought it would. The divorce went through a few months later. I moved off post into a small apartment in Fayetteville. It wasn't much. Peeling paint, noisy neighbors, but it was mine. I got a job at a nonprofit that supported military families dealing with deployment, reintegration, and domestic issues. They'd heard about my case. Apparently, people talk. Your perspective could really help others, the director said in my interview. You've lived what we're trying to protect people from. I got the job. Not because of Lucas. Because of me. That mattered more than I expected. Therapy became a regular part of my life. Not crisis management. Maintenance. Healing. I unpacked years of putting his needs ahead of my own. Of minimizing my feelings because the mission comes first. Of swallowing jealousy, fear, hurt. Of shrugging off red flags because I didn't want to be that wife. Dr. Chen never made me feel stupid for staying as long as I did. She just helped me understand why. When you build your whole identity around being someone's support system, she said once, it's terrifying to imagine who you are without them. But that doesn't mean there's nothing there. It just means you haven't met her yet. I met her slowly, piece by piece. In the way I started laughing again at stupid memes with new friends. In the way my heart no longer jumped every time my phone buzzed. In the way I could drive past Fort Liberty and not feel like my lungs were collapsing. One day, months after everything, I was sitting in a little cafe just off post, grading some intake forms. I heard someone clear their throat. "Excuse me? Are you Harper?" I looked up. A young woman stood there, maybe 22, wearing a faded unit t-shirt and leggings. Her hair was in a messy bun. Her eyes were tired. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Can I help you?" She glanced around, then slid into the chair across from me. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "My name's Kayla. My husband's in 3rd Brigade. I heard about everything with your ex and the general." Of course she had. News like that sticks. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, voice wobbling, "for going to IG, for not letting them bury it. People talk and, I don't know, it made me feel like maybe we're not completely powerless." My throat tightened. "I didn't do it to be an example," I said. "I know," she said quickly, "but you are. My friend was being gaslit by her husband about some shady stuff with his chain. She went to legal because she heard your story. It helped her get out." She fiddled with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "You probably don't feel like a hero," she said, "but a lot of us are really glad you didn't stay quiet." I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I said softly. She smiled, embarrassed, and stood. "I'll let you get back to your stuff," she said. "I just wanted you to know." She walked away. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty chair she'd left behind. Maybe I hadn't set out to inspire anyone. Maybe I'd just been trying to survive. But if my survival helped someone else say, "No, actually, you don't get to treat me like that," then maybe everything I'd been through wasn't just pointless pain. Maybe it was something else. A warning flare. A roadmap. A last straw that showed other people where theirs might be. I finished my coffee. I packed up my forms. I stepped out into the North Carolina sunlight, warm and bright on my skin. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something happening to me. It felt like something I could shape. My name is Harper Williams, and this was the last straw. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe.